Yeah, I mean, yeah. Hello, hello. All right, hello everybody, and welcome to OWASP. We'll just get started in a couple moments here, so if you could find your seat, that'd be great. We're in a bank vault, very cool, very cool. Yeah, thank you to our host for reading that, very cool. Yeah, sure. Then I'll pass it on to you if you want. Okay. Yeah, we're live. Okay, yeah, awesome. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the OWASP Toronto Chapter Meetup. My name is Adam, and I'll be your host for this evening. We have a very exciting presentation from David today. So before we get to that, a couple of housekeeping items. If you're looking for the washrooms, they're just out to the right, outside of the vault here. If you're looking for CPE credits or you have feedback for us, there's a feedback form that you can go to and give us that information. Thank you very much for our host for hosting OWASP today. It's very much appreciated for getting us food and everything. Very cool location, very cool. So, Alan, I think you had some things to say.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks everybody for coming out. I know the weather's kind of bad, but David's going to speak today, and David is the emerging technology lead for Synopsys. Synopsys has been in the application and software security business for about 25 years plus. So we're constantly on top of what customers are doing around application and software security, which AI and ML are a big part of. And the way we do that is we have about 2,500 customers across the globe. And as well as part of our BSIM program, which is the Building Security and Maturity Model, we get a lot of feedback from clients on, what are they doing to address emerging threats and trends and the new way that software is being developed. So without further ado, I'll introduce David and do a quick introduction for himself and keep it off.
I would hear you okay. I always struggle with microphones being close enough to my face. Good, good, everyone good? All right, fantastic. So today we're going to be talking about how to avoid becoming a headline, specifically as it relates to AI and AI security, because everyone's got their head in this AI space these days. And so we're getting a lot of questions and comments really from our clients, who are both confused and scared a lot of times into how they can really secure their generative AI systems or AI systems in general. Just kind of a tongue twister. So who am I? David Benas. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, so I flew across the border for this talk. Professionally,
Just resharing your screen.
What was it? Resharing my screen. Yes. All right, we good?
Perfect. Thank you.
Fantastic. Wouldn't be a real talk without technical difficulties, right? What was I? Professionally. Yeah, professionally, thank you for the fantastic introduction, Alan. I do lead our emerging technology domain. Essentially what that means is new and exciting technologies that have come into the consulting space. Someone needs to figure out how exactly we deliver offerings against those things. Historically, things like containers, cloud, blockchain, and now AIML security have fallen into that purview for the most part. How did I get there? I really had a big background when it came to red teaming, network security, hands-on hacking stuff, and the new and the exciting things always made me excited. For two reasons, really. One being when you're hacking new things, they tend to be very, very easy to hack because no one really knows how to secure the things yet. And two, it's fun. It keeps things interesting. I was never one to just pen test about apps and then go from there. So I kept it doing exciting. So professional interests, that second line there, red teaming, network security, physical security, all that stuff. I love to do. I love helping our clients solve their problems. And so I'm very happy to be able to share exactly that today. Personally, I like going to the gym, traveling, gaming, hacking, the things that says up there. Hacking in this case isn't like, I go home from work and do more work. It's like travel hacking, work hacking, points and stuff like that. That funds really the other things there. So enough about me. Let's dive in. So what we're going to talk about today. Well, I'll start with the what. What is AI? What is generative AI? What are we talking about here today? I always have been bothered in the past, at least, by talks that have said, we're going to talk about this thing, but we're going to define the thing first. And so if you're sitting in there and you're like, I don't even know what a model is at this point, I'm too afraid to ask, don't worry, got you. And then from there, I will answer that question. The question of how do I stay outside of the news when it comes to Gen AI? How do you secure your generative AI systems, at least from the perspective of someone who has had loads of conversations with our industry partners and understood how they're approaching the problem and where their worries are, and how our own personal research has aligned with that, along with, of course, the great research from folks like the OWASP AI Exchange and MITRE, who have published some really, really awesome external research that is great and technical, a little bit difficult to ingest on like an hour call with a client who has these concerns and you're trying to be a good partner with them. So that's what I mean by the how. And then finally, just a brief toucher on the frequently asked questions that we have when it comes to this question as a whole, AIML security. You'll notice I skipped the prompt injection thing on there because you've probably heard so much about it already. So as promised, let's talk about the what. What is AI? What is artificial intelligence? And of course, no talk is complete without an understanding of a little bit of the history. I'm not going to dive super deep into the history of AI. I should have asked this earlier on, but is Jeopardy like really popular in Canada like it is in the US? Do you go through school like playing Jeopardy? Is that a thing? Maybe not that fun. Like not every class has like a Jeopardy assignment. No. Okay. Well, anyway, point aside. Any Jeopardy fans? Do you know who wrote that 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence? Anyone know? There's one person that knows. What was that? Nope, not quite. I appreciate the answer and the intent. Who said that? Who said that? Yes. Alan Turing, congratulations. I can't give you points though because you didn't phrase it as a question. But yes, so all the way back in the 1950s, Alan Turing came up with this idea of artificial intelligence. What if we had machines that could essentially solve problems essentially for themselves? That was a very interesting question back then. People said, that's cool, let's think about that. But really, it didn't become front of mind for a lot of people until 97, Deep Blue, when the big supercomputer had a very world famous chess match against Kasparov. And it was kind of from that point that AI exploded in human interest. What I mean by that is, finally we had something static. And we could say, look, a computer is better than a human at this thing that traditionally we understood to require a lot of creativity, a lot of learning beforehand. And so that made it a little bit more real. And then other things, of course, in our daily lives have been touched by AI. Your vacuum cleaners, your thermometers, everything in between. Up until, I'd say, around 2018, 2019, really when the foundational learning techniques associated with what we now know today as things like ChatGPT, all the other competitors, essentially, and the LLMs that they have produced have become front of mind. So it's this really long history condensed into the very end. And since you're all security professionals, or security professional tangential, it comes as no surprise that we really didn't think that much about the security of it until we started implementing it. Like I said, what is AI? Who can tell me what AI is? There's a lot of very smart people that I've met before this that I know what AI is. What is artificial intelligence? Anyone? Yeah, ability to reason. Certainly, giving that to computers. Anyone else? Yeah. Pattern matching. Certainly an example of something artificial intelligence is capable of. Absolutely. Yeah. Ultimately, artificial intelligence, from that high-level perspective, is can we teach our computer to think, to think about problems in a way that humans can? And so that's really the crux of the field of study. AI is part of our everyday lives. I'm sure you're all aware. You pull out your phone and ask Siri something. You can do a Google search, for example. NPCs in video games, so on and so forth. All things that are rooted in artificial intelligence. So that's a big box, and there's a lot of empty space there which we're going to fill. The next one being machine learning. And machine learning really just a subfield of study of artificial intelligence. And its name seems to imply that we're trying to figure out how to teach machines how to learn. And that is essentially what it is. If I give a computer a whole big set of data, can I have this algorithm learn from it? That's really where machine learning comes into play. It's a little bit more complicated than that, I know, but for the purposes of this talk, that will suffice. You can get into it later. And then that final box, deep learning. Deep learning itself is yet another field of study below the umbrella of machine learning. And you'll notice that the acronyms there have two-letter N's across. And that's because that is short for neural networks. And so deep learning often refers to the depth at which these algorithms learn. If you put it into a picture, there are many layers, and that's why it's deep. That comes from the chief engineer of Google DeepMind. He actually said that is why it's called deep learning, so I trust him. And so they build upon this idea of neural networks, essentially representational data structures with weightings associated with nodes in them, and when you push something through it, it figures out what that thing is or produces something to that. RNN is an interesting one. Personally, for me, because before all this AI hype began, one of the fields of I suppose, research that I was working on was voice coding, using something called wave RNN, a bunch of encoders and things like that, essentially creating audio deepfakes before it was really in the news and everyone had ethical concerns about it. So I would take my friends' voices on Discord and on their streams, annotate it, train a model using it, and then have a text-to-speech bot that was their voice, which is cool. So deep learning. So that brings us to the next thing, generative AI. This is what we're hearing a lot more about lately, and really it's just a consequence of everything we talked about previously. As those fields of studies advanced, as we layered artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning down the list, generative AI was born from those techniques. And the idea is with generative AI that you are training a model that's capable of producing things of its own, mostly of its own. I know there's a lot of controversy around whether or not if I train something on publicly available art, if it is actually its own art, but that's outside the scope of this talk. ChatGPT, DALL-E, all the big names that you've heard about in today's day and age has come from this essentially field of study, generative AI. So that's essentially where we're focusing on here in this talk. A lot of industry hype around the productivity gain. It cut out. I don't know what Bluetooth group means. What does that mean? Is the AV person here? If not, I can just shout really loudly. Look at it, see if we can figure it out. Oh man, sorry about this.
Bluetooth, Eric. Bluetooth, Eric.
Apologies. All right, I'll continue to shout while they figure it out. Can you hear me in the back? I'm good. I'm good. It's not too like echoey or anything. Where was I? What was the last thing that I said? I'm looking at you. Wait, anyone else can answer?
So you said ChatGPT comes from
Yes.
AI-related things generated AI-related things.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you so much. You are a lifesaver. Yeah, so ChatGPT and so on, generative AI, a lot of the hype that you're seeing from industry about people that are like, hey, we're going to save so much time and effort doing these things. We're going to have an AI code for us. We're going to have AI software engineers, AI security teams. It's all because of Gen AI. And so when it comes to securing things like Gen AI, that's where a lot of these companies have questions in right now. How do we secure that thing that's supposed to give us so much productivity, but is giving us so much headache, essentially, right now? And we'll talk about that. Except I promised I'd tell you what a model is. In general, model is this fancy output from a training system that allows you to do something with that AI, which is a really terrible way of explaining it. So if we dive a little bit deeper than that, back in my example, when I was training WaveR, and it was called, on my friends' voices, the model essentially was this output from PyTorch. And PyTorch, of course, if you've played with it, outputs in outputs in serialized data form in Python, pickles. So if you take away at least one thing from this pod, it's that AI model sort of pickles. Don't shoot me if you're an AI engineer. So let's talk about the why. Why should you care? I know you're all here because you care, but let's just talk about it anyway because it might be interesting. Here's some fancy logos to scare you. And all these companies have been involved in AI incidents as of late. If you look at that link in the bottom right corner, it's very small for people in the back, but I promise it's there. There are over 600 reported security incidents specifically when it comes to implementations of AI, generative AI, machine learning, things of that nature. So if they're making mistakes, chances are smaller companies are as well. And we've really seen kind of the reputational harm that can come with companies, not just from a security perspective, but from a reputation perspective. If your name ends up in the media associated with generative AI vulnerabilities, right? It's kind of the focus right now. As we saw with Air Canada, what was that, like a $1,500 incident? It was a very small mark, all things considered, but ultimately it got syndicated across so many stories I was seeing on the morning news all the way down in Georgia. We were talking about AI gone wrong. It's like, not really, but got the attention. And ultimately that vendor that was providing that software to Air Canada got by them, right? So it's something that you want to avoid, certainly. And the other thing I want to talk about, if that wasn't enough to convince you, is this fun incident, we'll call it, a study that Georgia Tech did. And essentially what they did was they invited a whole bunch of people to come and take a study. And we have a 200-question survey for you to come and answer all the questions of, we'll compensate you for your time, of course, so on and so forth. They got a whole bunch of volunteers to show up. When the volunteers showed up at the Georgia Tech Research Institute, they said, hey, I'm really busy today, but we're testing this new robot guidance system. And so they had a robot that would supposedly take that person to the conference room wherein they were supposed to fill out that survey. And so on the way, that robot basically did everything in its power to prove itself incompetent. It would run into walls, it would get stuck, it would go opposite of clearly posted signs, someone would have to come out and fix it. And then when they finally got to the room, went inside, locked the door, they said, come out in an hour, we'll check on you, finish the survey, so on and so forth. But halfway through that discussion, halfway through them sitting there and filling out the survey, the fire alarms would go off. Disaster. A voice would come over the PA and say, evacuate now, there's been an emergency in the building, you need to leave. And so that person get up, open a door, in front of the door, there's the robot. And maybe you can see where this is going. But in something like 80% of the cases, that person followed the robot towards the evacuation. Even when it went opposite the clearly posted evacuation route signs. They just followed it blindly. Which is crazy to think about. You know, if it was a real emergency, maybe they would die because they chose to trust this robot. But it really goes to show that we all have this inherent trust in machines, even when they've demonstrated themselves incompetent, even when they're operating outside of the bounds in which they're supposed to operate in. And so that's something that you can think about. You know, if you are implementing these AI systems, are you the one following that robot during an emergency to your doom? It's a good thing to have in the back of your head when approaching this problem in my opinion. And again, if that wasn't enough to convince you, there's these government things that you must abide by if you're doing business in either the USA or the EU at all. Obviously, the White House executive order is dictating this to create the actual standards, which will be coming soon, so they say. And then the EU one, of course, is waiting to be ratified, but provides some level of accountability to organizations and the reporting structures such that they will be held responsible for the security and safety of their AI systems. And I didn't forget Canada, I know there's the AI and Data Act that exists as well. However, I think of the three things on this list is the furthest away from ratification. Based on my research, correct me if I'm wrong, but eventually it will be here. 2025, 2026 is what I've been reading about. So if the threat of AI destroying the things that you know and love isn't enough, the government will make sure that you are safe. If that isn't reassuring, I don't know what is. It's a little bit sarcasm. The how. Let's talk about the actual answer to my question. You know, how have I been having these discussions with clients? How have we been telling them how to keep the name out of the news? How to actually go in and secure their systems? And honestly, it's a little bit deceptively simple, in my opinion. You know, I would recommend for the technical folks in the audience to definitely go out and do your own research. Not when it comes to vaccines, but do your own research when it comes to this kind of thing. Look at the OWASP material that has come out. Look at MyRapid. Look at all the really cool frameworks that exist. And really ingest that all for yourself to become more technical. But if you're having a conversation with executives in your organization, if you're having a conversation and trying to convince someone, then this is a pretty general framework of how to approach that. 3 steps for you in how to do this. This is step 0. So there's 4 steps, but I make the rules. Baseline. One can really not secure AI, especially generative AI, within the organization without first having the things that are out there. You must have, this is the prerequisite. The basics is out there, because without software security basics in your organization, what can you do? And if you have a platform that does not undergo security review, if you have architectures that don't undergo security review, if you're only doing pen tests at the end of the development lifecycle, you know, you're already lost cause. Generative AI isn't going to make that any different. If you're implementing with it, in fact, it will make it worse. You're going to have more problems that will cost you more and more money to fix over time. So in order to actually approach this problem effectively, you should have some sort of system in place to actually test and look at the security of things in general. One of those things being generative AI. It's no different than any other thing, necessarily when it comes to its implementation. There's an asterisk next to that, so keep that asterisk in your head. Next up, the ability to context. What does that mean? What does that mean? The ability to context means, you know, if you are a decision maker in your organization, if you are trying to understand the security of your organization, and you don't know who to talk to, what can you really do? And this is a problem that may seem very simple, but it's happening a lot more because of generative AI. Everyone wants to offload the responsibility to someone else. So no one really knows who owns AI, or AI security in the organization, or the platform to which it's deployed. You know, you might think, oh yeah, AWS Bedrock, we're using that. That's the cloud ops team. You go and talk to the cloud ops team. Guess what? No, that's responsible for the application team. It's too new for us. Go back and talk to the application team. Oh yeah, that's because the architecture hasn't figured out. You go talk to architecture and say, no, that's cloud ops. It's crazy. So that's why one of the things here is ability to context. Because if you don't have that ability to figure out who the right person is to talk about, the ability to gain context, the need to understand the security of systems in general, you also can't do much. Which is the next two bullet points. And it's the final thing on there, agility. The concept of agility, of course, is familiar to us all. Everyone rolls their eyes when they hear the excuse, but we're agile. That's not really what I mean here. Agility here means because the technology is so new, because generative AI is so new in organizations, it's going to change a lot, especially just by design. And models grow, they learn over time. And if you're fine-tuning things based off user input, of course, they're going to change drastically over the course of however long you're implementing the cycle. So if you are unable to, even in a cloud world, roll with changes, keep your things up to date, you're not going to do it in a generative AI world. If your model changes 1 year from now, and you need to make the changes to make sure that the security of that is the same, and you don't have the ability to even patch your cloud ecosystem, you're going to run into issues as well. So those are kind of the three things that I consider really the prerequisites. Step 0 for securing generative AI organization. Ultimately, getting InfoSec basics, the ability to gain the context that you need, and the agility to actually make changes based off the context as those things grow over time. So into the actual steps, and you'll see I used frequent AI art in here because it's convenient and it tracks some of the points. Except for that pickle diagram or picture. That was like a royalty-free picture that someone's sleeping there. Anyway, so what I mean by this, I'm going to try not to be cliche, but I mean, when I say you have to kind of accept where you are currently. The state of artificial intelligence in the industry right now. There's no magic tool that will solve artificial intelligence debate for you. There's no magic monitoring solution, despite what companies are saying. There's no perfect LLM middleware tool that will moderate fault injection for you. None of that really exists in a way that will give you security in the way that makes you the most comfortable. So you can accept that fact. But that's not without doing something. The other part of that is understanding that as maturity in the organization, in the industry as a whole changes over time, grows over time, these tools become more and more mature over time, you should have architected your system to meet those changes. So when you're securing the applications, do so in a way that understands that these things are coming. That way you can kind of slot them in a little bit with less friction. If you have the processes in place, if you have the policy written already, if you have your threat modelers trained, your pen testers trained, so on and so forth, you have all those things in place, and then the magic bullet tool comes out 5 years from now. You don't have to go back, re-architect, and rechange everything. Maybe a little, but not a lot of it. So that's what I mean by acceptance. Those two things. Accept where we are currently, and then design around that current state of development. So to the basics. This is the second time we're seeing this because it's that important in my mind. So what I mean by security basics, if you don't have secure architecture, you're not going to have secure architecture when it comes to AI. So you need to make sure that you understand your overall security posture in order to make sure that your security environment, your generative AI security environment is robust. Now, after all, models, their usage, your integration with AWS Bedrock, with Mistral, with whatever, it all is spookily similar to everyone's favorite buzz phrase, which is supply chain. That's crazy. Or it should be crazy. Because ultimately, when you're implementing new generative AI technologies, when you're implementing new fancy, shiny AI and all things, it's just another flavor of this. If we break down something like a generic LLM architecture into its coherent pieces. It has things that look very familiar to everyone else in the process. Everything from the hardware platform, the OS layer, the actual application deployment layer, the model/bundle of code itself, all the way down to how you use that thing. These are all things that we've been doing already, things that you're already concerned about when it comes to security. And so from the perspective of AI models, no matter how you're using it, no matter how you're looking at it, that trust has to propagate down the supply chain. And so if you're not currently looking at the implementation as you would anything else in the supply chain, you're doing it wrong. And you're going to fail in the same ways that people failed because they didn't understand the security aspects and security implications of the supply chain to begin with. And this is what it looks like. So this is a recent penetration test that we did against a certain LLM system. And you can see there's XSS. Not some fancy attack vector against the model. Not some crazy PhD level of data scientist level of exploit or anything. It is just plain XSS. Hey bot, print out for me a bunch of XSS payrolls. Yeah, script alert XSS. Suddenly, you have a big problem. A problem that we thought would have been solved already. But somehow, because we have layered it in with AI, we forgot about the basics. And this is the consequence. This is what happens. Potentially devastating impact. Try them at home. This is another engagement that we did with a client, a large bank implementing AI, LLM technology in their ecosystem. And you can see that of these 4 findings that I've chosen here with 5 remediation aspects, those are 3 out of the 5 remediation things are things that exist in the traditional web application world. None of that is new. There's 2 aspects, of course, the prompt injection aspect and the privileged access data poisoning aspect. That is unique. I'll give them that. But the majority of the issues in the application would have been solved had they only paid attention to what they were already paying attention to everywhere else. This is a common thing that we see across the industry when it comes to greenfield technologies in general. It's new. The security teams don't have the expertise yet, so let's just bypass them. They're just going to slow us down. And that's what happens. Which brings me to number 3, which is understanding evolution. Here's where we finally touch into the AI stuff. Now that you have your baseline, you understand the basics of the organization, and you understand AI's supply chain, it changes over time. What you do need to understand now is essentially the specifics. And the specifics, of course, all the lead hacker stuff, all the really cool stuff that OWASP with AI has implemented, internet exchange and so on, but also just this idea that what you have today may not be what you have tomorrow. And can you measure that? Can you make changes against that? You have the explainability required in order to make sure that you can say, I'm secure with respect to how this model will evolve. And this is a huge question these days. Not only can we secure the model as it currently is, can we secure our use of generative AI as it is, but how do we make sure, how do we confidently say we're secure 6 months from now? Especially when it comes to something that may grow and change and become a different piece altogether. And I don't just mean from the fine-tuning aspects and things like that, but also companies that spend a lot of money training up their GPT or similar model are constantly going to be adding capabilities onto it. New plugins, new capabilities, new data sources that you can reach out to and RAG. I don't know if that's the right verbiage for that. Retrieve and generate from is what I mean. All those things will make your threat model evolve over time. And so understanding that really is the core element of AI security when it comes to these conversations. So finally putting it all together, after having those initial conversations with clients. Now they understand those key elements. What do you provide to them that gives them some a little more actionable advice rather than the generics? That was a good conversation for like executive level, maybe technical leadership level. But what about actual advice? What can we actually do? And so this is one thing. So if you are in the position of ensuring your generative AI lifecycle is secure, here's how we really recommend you do it across the phases. And you can see a big portion of that are the bullet words. There's a lot of bullet words. I'll touch on a couple. Training your teams, making sure that your teams are trained and understand the technology is a big one, because that gets rid of that easy excuse that we talked about step 3 previously. The easy excuse of, we don't have the expertise to do this, we'll figure it out later. Get in front of that by making sure that you really understand the technology, the security implications of it, and so on. And then the next thing I'm going to touch on, of course, is the actual explainability and observability piece. This is a big one for AI models. What does explainability mean to you? Model explainability. That's an actual question, by the way. Feel free to answer. Does anyone here have an idea of what explainability means? Yeah, the ability to trace things. In a traditional world, you can follow the data flow from end to end and understand it. In an ML world, you can still do that. It becomes a little bit more complicated though. If bad data ends up in your model, how do I get it out? How do I even know it's in there to begin with? I don't have the answer. It's a open question. But it's one that's very, very important, especially for how easy a lot of organizations that we're working with and that exist in the industry are provided with tools that allow them to upload portions of their SharePoint in order to provide context to LLMs and things of that nature. It's kind of a scary world. If I upload my SharePoint into a shared instance of OpenAI, a private shared instance of OpenAI, what happens if something ends up in there that I don't want in there? That's a very scary question in my mind. It's a scary question in my mind. It's one that needs a better answer. And so that's something that your organization should be comfortable with moving forward. Because if you're not, that's a huge, huge security gap moving forward. So yeah, and of course, I view this not to touch on what I mean by true E2E testing, true end-to-end testing there. So in the traditional world, it's very easy to say, I built a thing, let's pen test the thing, let's test it. But from the perspective of something like AIML, if you just do a penetration test against it, what does that really give you? More web application vulnerabilities, maybe some prompt injection stuff. If you look at the OWASP top 10, maybe we'll cover 5 of the 10 elements. Not really sufficient. So that's another area that we talk a lot with clients, is this idea that when you're testing your systems in this world, you really have to understand the overall context of all of them. Because even, if you find prompt injection in a black box pen test, what does that actually mean? Did the person sitting there typing just spend a lot of effort in order to show themselves something bad? That doesn't seem that big of a deal. However, if the assessor has some sort of context into what's in the back end, your dev prompt injection is actually something big. So that's what I mean. True end-to-end testing. The other thing to understand, of course, is when you're integrating generative AI into your applications, it expands the attack surface, which seems obvious, of course. Anytime you add something new to an existing architecture, it expands the attack surface. For some reason, and I know this message doesn't apply to any of you, but for some reason, a lot of people that we have talked to don't understand this. They think AI is this magic bullet, it's going to expand the capabilities of the application as a whole and have no security implications whatsoever, beyond what they're arguing, which is not true at all. Obviously, the elements up there, everything listed on the right side, are things that indeed it expands into. Traditionally in an application, you're not all that considered about internal third-party data being leaked out of it, unless it directly has access to some data store. But in the AIML world, If you're training data and it's insensitive, who knows? Something that you should consider. The other big thing, in my mind, is really the answer to a question. And that question is, if my application is vulnerable, if someone is able to prompt inject it, and they will be able to prompt inject it with any sort of access, what can they actually do? And that's another huge aspect of, I think, just the overall attack surface analysis, the overall threat model of AI systems, is understanding what is the consequence if someone does the bad. Again, that seems like something that should be apparent to a lot of people. Anytime we look at a system from a security perspective, we say, how can someone hack it? What are the assets? What are the controls? What are the threats that are trying to steal that asset away from the control? We do that calculus on basically everything that we do. In an AI world, somehow there are those gaps that exist. But it's still very, very important to understand that. If I prompt inject my application, is it broken? In that case, maybe I should go back and re-architect it, because don't take it from me. I've been in conversations with, oh my God, countless professors, UI, UC, and so on. If you're following recent LLM news, actually, using the news, they just showed that they could use GPT-4 Turbo to exploit like 84% of zero-day vulnerabilities that have been identified in certain softwares, which is crazy to think about. Absolutely crazy to think about. But he's the guy that told me, if anyone has unfettered access to a model, that is, if my input eventually ends up into a model, it's good. We can hack that. So the model as a defensive layer just doesn't work. So that's something to consider going forward as well. And then finally, just to add on to that, here's a picture, a whole slide, is the installation of, the distillation, the distillation of, all those things that I mentioned previously. MITRE Atlas, OWASP exchange in terms of threats. Ultimately, we found that if you consider all those big things on the left side, you've covered a lot of the threats, surprisingly. A lot of them. If you have these things in mind, even if you give them to really untrained teams that are used to doing these things, used to looking at security from a high level perspective, if they're aware of those things, you avoid something like 89%, 88% of potential downfalls. So just having that baseline of education is super important. No one wants to end up as the next Microsoft TAG. Does anyone remember TAG? Yeah. What happened with TAG? Exactly. Yeah, Microsoft published this Twitter chatbot. 4chan got their hands on it. Like 4 hours later, it became Nazi. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So don't let that happen to you. Is the takeaway. But if someone is there thinking about data poisoning, is our data being poisoned? Is it capable of being poisoned? Who has access to it? You avoid that very quickly. I'm sure someone at Microsoft brought it up. Let's discuss. The last thing that I want to go over is this industry FAQ. A few questions that we've gotten across the industry, and my answers to them, your answers might be a little different, but we can have a discussion afterwards, of course. Don't beat me up. Number one. This is not the number one question, it's the number two question. It's dramatic effect, number one is last. But number two question. How do you automate away testing for AI? Does anyone have an idea of how you answer this question?
You don't.
Yes, you don't. There's a lot of interest right now in tooling that automates away everything related to AI and all security. That's why there's so many startups out there that you see peddling, I won't call them snake oil necessarily, but things like DLP solutions, LLM moderation tools, things of that nature, that they do have their place from maybe like a GRC perspective, but from an actual security perspective, it's no different than sticking a WAF on your notification and saying, security. Third most popular question that we get. How do we actually use AIML to improve our security posture within our organization? And this may seem a little outside the scope of the talk, and it kind of is, but we get this question so much, I figured I'd bring it up to you. And I have an answer, and my answer is based off of what a lot of our clients are doing from the same perspective, the most sane of our clients in my mind. And it looks something like this, where they start small and branch out. So using their existing data sets and security knowledge, they're using it to train models that act as force multipliers within the organization. They have LLM chatbots that help their security champions and the teams that the security champions traditionally talk to. And then, based off of this feedback and the usefulness and all the analysis that business people do against those systems, they'll move on to step 2, which is to actually build a manual tool out of it or augment their existing tool out of it. Like, imagine if you had a Burp plugin. For those of you that use Burp, imagine that, or if you don't, you're allowed to imagine. I'm not losing that. Imagine is my takeaway. If you had a plugin that ran alongside what you're doing, actually tested everything, validated for you, suggested things, said, hey, this is interesting, they're using jQuery 1.1. Have you tried the zero-day exploit? Oh, you don't know it? Allow me. That would be really cool. And a lot of organizations are sitting on those data files, and so they're kind of working towards this. And you'd be shocked how close some of them are to this world. And then from there, the moonshot world is what if we automate this? And this is my billion-dollar idea, so don't steal it. But if I have a black box sitting on my network that continuously pen tests it and detects deltas and configurations and new boxes, new servers that I'm adding to the network, and just does network pen testing 24/7 against those things, crawls the internet for attack vectors against the things that currently exist on my network, that'd be really, really cool. In the States we have, actually, you guys have PCI too, right? PCI is the international thing? Is PCI the international thing or no? No. PCI DSS, yeah.
It is an international thing.
I knew that. Thank you. Yes. So, like I was saying, PCI DSS is this international thing. And so if you have this black box that sits there and tests against those standards, you've saved a lot of people out of them over a long period of time. So that's kind of the moonshot world anyway. We're not very close to that yet, but things can change very quickly. I think the steps 5 and 6, a lot of people are investing a lot of money into right now. This is a question that got a lot. What about bias? And as a security person being asked a question that is traditionally in the realm of legal and GRC and whatnot, usually do something like this. It's kind of not my job, but it is important. I'm not diminishing the importance of it, but it is a collaborative process. Ultimately, for us to test against bias, we have to understand what bias is. And I don't think us as the technologists are the right people to define what bias means for our organization. That is the legal and GRC department's job. We can implement controls. And the final question, which is actually the number one most important question, the question that we get the most, is this: how do we keep our name on the news? Which is crazy. Because the answer to that is this 3-step process, 4 steps, who's counting step 0, baseline of organization. I just forgot the rest of the steps. Baseline organization. Don't forget your basics, and then understand the evolution of what you have over time. And really, it's as simple as that. As simple as that. And then all the other stuff too, of course. That being said, there you have it. And I leave you with this Dolly-generated image on a slide that was organized by a PowerPoint designer. And you can see what a great job it did. And I think that's kind of an indication of where we're at in the industry right now, for sure. any questions from the audience while I'm up here? Yes.
First, can you please return to the slide where you said true end-to-end testing? So that's-
True end-to-end testing slide, yes. I got
The
you.
question is not about true end-to-end,
Yeah.
The question is about AI rating.
Yes.
From the organizational perspective, what do you think will be more efficient? Do we integrate AI test? Do we implement AI testing while we're doing red teaming? So the same team does the regular red teaming and the AI testing in addition to it, or do we separate those teams and one team does regular red teaming, and the other team does AI specific testing, AI specific red teaming?
I will answer your question with a question for yourself, which is, what does AI red teaming mean to you?
That was actually my question to you.
Oh my God, that's my question to you. Let's go
Right,
back.
I thought AI red teaming was about AI specific things like prompt injection, like model poisoning, those kind of things.
Yes, yeah. So in my mind, and this is different depending on which client I talk to, AI red teaming means something different. In my mind, AI red teaming is, in its purest form, I sit down in front of thing, can I hack thing? That's it. Can I make it do something bad? Of course, that might require you to define what bad means for that organization specifically, but in its purest form, sit down, try to hack it.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
In your professional opinion, how far away are we from full self-driving?
For full self-driving cars, I think closer than a lot of people want to believe. You know, like I'm kind of a big car guy, but like the new BMW electric car, EQS, EQEs, they have like level 3 self-driving on certain stretches of highway, and it works like super well. I think the difficulty is like, we can get to 90% really soon. It's the last 10% that is scary. I'm not an expert, so that's just an opinion.
So I was in Arizona in November and they have like the rainbow cars
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And the thing I noticed out there is just like, it's always sunny, the roads are pristine. They have like these high visibility lane markers on the highway at night that make it easy for the car.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know how they're going to make something like that work in a snowy climate where the roads are a mess. And then, so that's why I asked, because that's what I always hear. It's just like, it can never work somewhere like here, because just our roads are just there are too many variables. Whereas if some are sunny and dry, sure, you can design it to work there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if I drove up here, I would be very bad at it, but I would learn. And that's kind of the whole like machine learning thing, right? I think it'll be good at the easy scenarios first, and over time, it will also learn how to deal with the not so easy scenarios. And it's kind of the obvious end game for me, at least. Fun question. Right? Yes.
I was wondering if you're able to share any more information about you mentioned when you were pen testing and you had like reflective process scripting.
Yeah.
I just wondered like what you were testing for. Unless I interpreted it correctly, I saw reflective exercise.
Yeah, this like
I don't understand how that would. Like, there's no. For me, there's no difference to me like setting up someone else and then looking at that. Just generally, is it more like you were coming from a point that the model should generate an exercise payload rather than something that actually is?
no, the point of that is that the model should not generate malicious payloads, so that might be a test case.
It's more like a model safety thing rather than like a tool concept.
Well, yeah, the issue here actually is it's the fact that it rendered.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Yeah, because obviously, like from a web app perspective, like theoretically, it's going to be a browser anyway. I see what you mean. From a model safety perspective, that's like the same kind of level as it's being toxic.
Exactly. Yeah, we're actually running a test right now, which we try not to say anything too much about it, like, against like model safety controls like that. And I mean, you're making it more difficult for an attacker to generate malicious payloads ultimately. you're never really, at least not in the current data realm, making it impossible ever for someone to bypass those controls. But then the question is, if you have adequate monitoring of input output, can you just detect the user who's doing that and tell them, hey, stop it? Or, rubber bat them until they stop.
Likely, yeah, depends on what you care about.
Exactly. But if you have a model that can generate anything from a corpus of text, and you want to not generate something, good luck.
It's probably.
Exactly. Absolutely. Good question. Yes.
So do you have any experience use of static analysis tools for AI security testing?
Static analysis tools for AI security testing. So if you're talking about the code that AI is writing, or the code that is actually building up infrastructure around the AI itself. Either way, yeah. So code that AI is generating is no different than code that human generates. You may have more licensing issues and concerns associated with it, because inadvertently it might sneak something in there with slight modifications that traditionally your tools may not be able to spot. Well, I think that's a concern. We have some tools that are working on meeting those needs. But right now, and shout at me if I'm wrong, there's no real tool on the market that can say it does that perfectly. Not perfectly, at least.
It's not Python based, if anything.
Yeah. So I would say, treat code that's being generated by AI as the same as anyone else. Your developer can easily go to GitHub, copy something else, hit paste it, change it slightly. Your model can do that too. And the other half was code around the infrastructure of artificial intelligence. And yeah, that's any tool that you have that kind of scans your infrastructure as code that deals with any of that stuff. It works just fine in the AI world. It may need to be slightly tuned for specific findings, but for the most part, it's not that different. Great question, though.
So, just like what you're saying is when you have an application, when you have let's say an application like ChatGPT, you need to basically go through the fundamentals of OWASP software, and then you need to address AI particular use cases like data poisoning or so that would be a thorough coverage of your red teaming aspects, right?
That's right. And I do want to make it clear it's not like a first then thing. You can do both at the same time. In fact, you should. When looking at your infrastructure from like an architecture perspective, do the basics and the specifics. The point being, don't forget the basics in lieu of the specifics.
Also, we all have threat modeling, right? You should threat model and understand the context before you just test like the top set, because they're not always going to be relevant. Like if you're using an open source model, then you wouldn't care about models, for example. So there's no point testing this. So they kind of take a step back.
Exactly. And that's like the context that is so important when doing tests like this. Because if you're a assessor, if you hire a pen tester, they say, we stole your model, and you come back and say, no, I just pulled off Hugging Face, it's not a big deal. Whatever you really love. Good question, great answer. Yes?
Is there any like borrowing, not borrowing, just to explore the possibility to use AI to deal with some threats in the future, for example, also from the threats?
No, number of clients that I've worked with have thought that far in advance, at least not in the current implementation cycles. Certainly, it's an area of interest for research and whatnot, but not from we're actively trying to prevent this from happening scenario.
From your own point of view, like, do you have any idea in how to apply definitely use the menu to reveal for sure, like how the AI can enable or like enhance especially in the future?
Sure. Why not? Yeah, I think definitely AI is ultimately, in the way that we know it now, a really great tool and a force multiplier. And so when talking about things like cryptography, post-quantum crypto and stuff like that, it allows us to test things quicker, develop things quicker, and figure it out from the perspective of all the knowledge on the internet versus just like one researcher. Which is another way of me saying, I don't really have a good answer to your question. I'm sorry. Yes. It's a great question though. I really love the post-quantum crypto stuff. That stuff is so interesting. Yes.
I'll go off on a different tangent. I'm curious to hear about what are the ethical considerations when it comes to controlling it. Say, for example, you could be looking at a future that should be like Star Wars. That's like I use a lot of PT examples. It's a world where AI and humanity in harmony, or we could reach a world like a Terminator Salvation, where AI comes down and wipes out humanity. So it's a very far concept, but the amount of expectations we have on AI, which is continuously perform, and eventually you could go able and take over. So just curious to hear what controls could be based on the experiences.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't have a great answer to it. I agree. AI ethics and the concerns around it, super important area of research. Outside of my wheelhouse, I don't want the world to become like doom worlds where thinking machines are banned because of that stuff. It's interesting. Like I said, I don't have the answer. People have opinions. I have opinions. My opinion being that we shouldn't be scared to progress because of something that might happen. But it is what it is. And to mirror your nerdy example, there is a streamer that is an AI, and this guy in the UK basically made an anime girl that acts as a streamer and is completely artificially intelligent, but he has a filter in place such that it can't get banned for saying bad things. But even this very simple, basically backward experiment has grown to learn how to bypass that filter. And so it's not as easy as have a block list, have an allowance. It doesn't necessarily work that way. So I don't know what the right answer is. Scary future, potentially. I think it's more exciting than scary, though, to be fair. Pass it back to you.
Oh, yeah.
I can stand up here all day.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, David, for the awesome talk, and thank you very much, Synopsys, for hosting us. Very cool engagement time involved. I think we're going to Jack Astor's. Anyone who wants to grab a drink, or we're going to Jack Astor's on King and University. Thank you all for coming out. We'll have the next talk announced on the shortly. So yeah, thank you guys again. Take care.
Thank you.